Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to the Benjamin Law Firm, Missouri DWI and Criminal Law Center webcast that I've been doing. I have really enjoyed talking to you and educating everyone about the law with special guests. And tonight, my very special guest is someone who reached out to me about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he knew me when I was a brand new lawyer, pretty much less than 2 years out of law school. And he knew me because he was one of my clients. And his story is amazing. And I wanted to showcase him here because not only has he turned his life around from the before when he was young and stupid, I think he'll admit, to now being a very successful businessman, family man. He's written a book. He's a remarkable person. I want to introduce everyone to Kyle Dean Houston. And you go by Kyle still, don't you?
I do, but on the book it's Kyle Dean Houston. So.
And your website is Kyle Dean.
On my website, yeah. Most people from when I grew up that call me Kyle Dean Houston are mad at me. So it's like your mother when she calls you by your first, middle, and last name. So,
gotcha.
Got me. But feel free to call me Kyle. Yes, I'm very excited to be talking to you. I kind of feel like. Because I'm from Kansas City and I haven't done a podcast or a webinar with anybody from Kansas City, that this is kind of a homecoming for me.
So it is a homecoming, for sure.
You mentioned that I was young and dumb. I might still be old and dumb, but we got each other both when we were new. I was a new criminal and you were a new attorney, and we got through that really, really trying time together.
Well, and ironically, we both turned 50 this year. And so not only were we new in our respective places in life at that time, we were the same age.
Same age, yeah.
Yeah. So, I said you have a past. Let's start with where you started. So you grew up in Lafayette County, didn't you?
I did. I grew up in, it's really funny because people might know when I mentioned Higginsville on this episode here. So yes, I grew up in Higginsville, which is a really small town. For the people that don't know, I was, for lack of better words, I was the school athlete. Things came easy to me. I did pretty good in school, even though I didn't try that hard. And I think most people, when I went off to explore the world, probably made an assumption that I was going to be highly successful.
Because you were successful as a youngster, it sounds like, through high school.
Yeah. Because of that, I didn't understand weakness. Because of that, I didn't understand how people fall into traps and how they lose control, right? Because again, everything had come easy to me. So fast forward to about 25, 26 years old, I was a young entrepreneur. I had 8 employees. I had a carpet store downtown Kansas City, and I got addicted to methamphetamine. So
how does that happen, Kyle?
How does that happen?
People who are watching this are probably either A, in the middle of addiction themselves, looking for hope, which is your message, or maybe the family of loved ones, parents, those kind of people who just don't understand what happened.
So I will tell you that how does that happen? The question of how does that happen is something that we could probably spend the rest of our lives pontificating about, right? But the way it happened for me was disguised insecurities, disguised self-worth issues that I've come to grips with over the last 28, 25 years of my life. And not being initiated, falling into the wrong crowd, and really, so methamphetamine, I'm just going to throw this out at you. People see the end result. They see the person, they see them losing weight, they see the poster child, which is a hideous version of what they used to be. That's not what happens in the interior world. Meth is every bad thing that you can imagine erased instantly. So when I tried it, and it was uncut, and I was hanging out with people that had a bottomless bag of this powder, it was just a perfect storm for me to get addicted. So
what even led you to try it the first time? Like, everyone's story is probably different.
Yeah, of course. What led me to try it is I've always been an ornery boy. And so it's not the first drug I tried, right? I'd done all the usual suspects, LSD, weed. Of course, I started drinking when I was 13, 14 years old, which is not unusual in the 80s in Higginsville. And
It wasn't
I,
unusual where I grew up either,
that's
Kyle. I
right.
grew up in Harrisonville. Drinking in high school was the norm. We did field parties. People were bored. You went
People were
cruising, you
bored.
went drinking.
That's right. But I tried cocaine. I tried all sorts of things. Tried being the optimal word, right?
Hmm.
Um, again, just at the right time, the right amount, and the wrong crowd became the recipe for addiction for me. Like I
I have,
didn't.
as a lawyer through the years, I've had people say to me that meth, you're addicted to it the first time you try it. Does that ring true for you?
I tell you what. I mean, I can certainly see why people would say that, but I also can certainly see how I could have walked away very easily after the first couple of weeks of using. So I don't know that addiction in the way that we're going to eventually talk about it in this conversation, in reference to being a junkie, no, that's not going to happen your first time. But it's a really good drug. It's a really, otherwise people wouldn't get addicted. So I
What's so
think it
good
really
about it?
depends on the person. Huh?
Right, it depends on the person. What's so good about it? It makes you feel invincible. It makes you forget your problems. Obviously, losing weight, some people try it just for that. But then I've seen clients who, they age 30 years in a year. They look and their teeth are rotting out of their head. I mean, there's some really serious consequences besides
Very.
the ability to get arrested.
That's right. I think getting arrested is probably, in the lower bottom half of the consequences, right? Because you've got death and everything that stands before it. But how does it feel? Invincible is a great word for it, but I think that there's a lot of things that you can point at and say, oh, that made me feel invincible. To me, again, the best way to describe what meth is to describe what it's not. So if you can imagine the most nervous feeling or the greatest heartbreak you've ever been through or the death of a family member or any of these extremely negative, deeply held emotions, if you could imagine literally taking a powder and erasing that instantly, then you start to understand what meth does to a human being. And it not only erases it, right? Let's pretend that your life is in turmoil and you're rock bottom and you can't see any way to possibly fix it. Not only does it erase any of the insecurity or the guilt or the shame or any of the stuff that kind of tags along with it, but it instantly makes you feel like you can fix it all. So that's where the invincible stuff comes in. And this is why it's this perfect drug, because unlike cocaine, it lasts for a while. I mean, if you do, we'll call it a bump, we'll be a little colloquial here. If you do a line of cocaine, you're going to want to do another line 5 minutes later, right? And you're going to chase it forever. Methamphetamine, you do a line, you get this feeling that I just described to you, this invincible situation, and it lasts a day or two,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And so I don't think the drug was designed to bring people down, but if you believe in some sort of a dark side of the universe, this is a perfect design for human beings to get addicted because it sneaks up on you, because it can fool you and show you all these positive things that happen while you're high.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're what you described earlier, where you're skinny and you're losing your teeth and you've got all those consequences sneaking up on you. But by that point, there's no way you can quit.
How
So
long were you using? How many years did that last?
yeah, so I mean, look, again, I'll say I tried it. I did it for, from the 18 years old to 25, I would do it 4 times a year, right? Somebody would have some at a party and we'd have fun. So I was doing it then, but getting addicted, right? Falling into this crazy trap at 25. I was arrested as a notorious meth cook by the age of 27. So we're talking somewhere between 18 months and 2 years and I had already fallen as far as anybody can imagine.
What was your worst moment when you realized you hit rock bottom?
Well, so the worst moment for me, there's so many to choose from, but I think the worst moment for me was going through this process of sobering up in Lafayette County Jail, promising my parents, promising myself after 5 months that, this would never happen, help me make bail, blah, 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 blah. And getting out within a day of walking out after making all these promises to myself, having a needle in my arm and having another case, being brought back to Johnson County and sitting in a cell all by myself. I'd burned every bridge you can imagine with my mother, with my friends, with anybody on the planet. I was literally alone in a cell by myself 23 hours out of every single day, facing 30 years with no parole. That was rock bottom for me. And thinking I would never get to contribute, I would never do anything in a significant way. I wouldn't get to raise a family. The people that I love are going to be dead before I ever see the daylight again. So that was pretty tough. But I got a lot of really close seconds to that too.
Yeah. What did you end up doing?
I hope I didn't bring everybody down already. I hope this is somewhat interesting.
It was a tough time in your life, and you had to make some choices. What did you
Let's fast forward and say, hey, I'm a pretty good dude now, and then we'll jump back into this.
Fast forward to you being a very successful businessman, family man, and writing a book.
And a loving, adoring husband and father of 4 children. So yes, the old Kyle. What was the question?
Well, what did you do? Your choices that you had to make. You're in jail. You're facing multiple charges. You're facing life without the possibility of parole, which that means you had, on the drug side of the world, it means you had a serious trafficking case or manufacturing case, right?
It was trafficking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to set that up, what's really, really important is when I spiraled into addiction in an extremely short amount of time, what ended up happening is the person that was giving me all the drugs decided that my addiction wasn't fun anymore, and she cut me off. I'm a clever guy, and I taught myself how to cook, right? So I created this world where I thought I was just going to sustain my addiction, but what ended up happening was the other addicts and the other bikers and everybody else started to perpetuate this bigger cook persona, right? And so I didn't see any way of getting out of it. I started using needles, spiraled into depression and all these other things. And literally my exit strategy was to have an overdose. I thought the only way I'm ever going to quit this drug is to either have an overdose or to commit suicide, which, inside the book that I wrote, there's all of these moments. But if you understand that, then you'll understand now, fast forward a bit and just parachute right in the middle of this cell where I'm starting to get some clarity, right? Because you don't sober up from meth. I don't know if you sober up from any drug overnight, right? But you certainly, when you're doing copious amounts of methamphetamine to the degree to where you want or are trying to have an overdose, it takes months before you start to recognize your father's son inside your head. And so I'm sitting there starting to realize, oh my God, I was trying to die. I was trying to kill myself. And now look at the consequences. They're all in front of me. So what the heck am I supposed to do? And you know what? I just told all this story and I forgot your question. But if you can remind me, I'll jump back into it. But I think all of that stuff's relevant to understand what that rock bottom really felt like and what it was like to sit inside that cell and how I got there. So I think what is the most beautiful thing about my story, and there's lots of beautiful moments as well, is that also inside this moment, which was the most tragic time of my life, I had this spiritual awakening, which was driven by all of that tragedy, which I think is the saving grace of it all, for sure.
Whoops, I had muted myself. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
The question really was, you've described how you got there and how it even took you a really long time for you to get your senses back, essentially, and to feel sobered up again. What did you do with it then? You're facing all this prison time. You ultimately have to make a decision how to resolve your criminal cases. What happens at that point?
Well, so I turned to two people. I turned to you to get me out of trouble.
I'm grateful.
Then I turned to God, and that's not really a person. I arrived at this moment where I don't care who you are, right? I don't care if you're an atheist. I don't care if you believe in Muhammad, Jesus. None of that stuff matters. You're going to arrive at that moment, at that rock bottom, and you're going to wonder, what the hell? Why would this happen to me? How did I ever get in this situation? And what does my life mean? Because there's got to be purpose inside all of this. And so I arrived at that through pain and suffering and agony. And I did not turn to God. And this is really important. And I think it's what makes it more authentic, is I didn't start praying and falling on my knees and say, God, get me out of this trouble. I literally said, you know what? I don't have anything better to do. I want truth. I mean, here I am all alone. I want truth. And I literally separated from everything that was taught to me as a child. I chose not to believe in Hare Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad. Forget all of that stuff. I broke down my spiritual beliefs into three things. One, that there is a creator of the universe. Two, that if I asked for truth with pureness of heart, that it would come to me. And three, if 1 and 2 were wrong, then 3 didn't matter. We were all screwed anyway, right? And I literally just sat there and listened, taught myself how to meditate, and read the 12 steps.
Reading the 12 steps, some people have found that very helpful. Was that all you were able, or all you needed, or did you need more? Ultimately.
No. That was just great. And I don't know if you wanted to talk about spirituality quite this much, but I mean, it's a very important part of the story. So needs a word. I don't know what I needed. I'll tell you what I got that worked really well. I got 2 books that came into my cell and this was after weeks of being mad and going through all the stages of grief and all those things, being mad at God, being mad at me, sad, depression, blah, blah, blah.
I remember you actually, the mad stage, the sad stage, the very scared stage, of course,
Yeah. So I asked for a teacher, not in those words. And what came to me, and I still don't remember to this day how they made it into my cell. It wasn't like they fell from the sky, but it was 2 books. One was about Edgar Cayce, who some of your listeners may know. It's the most documented medium in the history of the world. And the other one was the 12 steps. And the 12 steps to me was this amazing framework for spirituality. It wasn't the blueprint of how to get sober, because at this point, and this is the crazy thing about my sobriety, I've never gone to treatment longer than 3 days, right? I walked out of a treatment before any of the jail stuff happened, but I never got treatment. I never went to AA or NA meetings. I made my decision in that cell to fill my heart with something completely different, which is somewhere around love and oneness. And it was because of those 2 books, and it was because of the way I viewed what the 12 steps really were. And I will tell you right now, that's the surefire recipe for sobriety. And that's the surefire recipe for transformation and evolution and all those things. So that was very important to me. And I'm not sure I could have ever changed as radically as I did had I not gone through what I went through. Not that I was a bad person, but let's face it, I wasn't this deep, right? I wasn't capable of understanding, empathizing with other people's weakness, other people's sadness at the level that I do now, which I wouldn't give away for anything.
you were young and you were spinning fast as far as you were an entrepreneur and you were trying to get someplace in life from high school to business. You were on a trajectory, and so it makes sense that you weren't that deep and slowing down and paying attention and being present, right?
And I don't look, I think in all fairness to the 28-year-old Kyle Houston, I don't think there was a lot of people, at least in my world, that were very deep, right? I mean, we're talking about understanding other human beings. That's not something we were taught in the 70s and 80s, so this is something that I got a crash course in.
Yeah.
By myself.
Crash course in figuring out who you are too.
Yeah, which we're still working on.
Aren't we all? So, all right, so you're in jail, you're reading these books, and ultimately you have to finish the case with me, the 2 cases, right?
Right.
So what happens?
What happens? About a month, if I remember correctly, about a month before sentencing, you and I had a meeting, and you said, hey, we just deposed the officer that pulled you over. He had no business pulling you over. Everything that was in the car, everything that was in the trucks that they searched is insubmissible evidence. It's with fruits of the poisonous vine or the tree.
You're close.
One of those 2. Yeah.
Close.
What is it?
Fruit of the poisonous tree. And essentially, and I think I just said it wrong myself because I was, but yes, you, about a month before trial, deposing witnesses, and I remember coming to you and saying, don't give up, don't plead guilty, let's try this case, let's have a suppression hearing to suppress the evidence. Fruit of the poisonous tree would keep out everything that was found in the vehicle if the officer violated the 4th Amendment and pulled you over wrongfully, essentially.
That's right. And so where I was at, so then you put it in my lap. This really heavy decision, and of course I'm elated because what came along with that was, my next question, which is, okay, great, the case is a bit weaker. What's the downside? What's the upside? The downside was if I lose the case, I get the 30 years, right? That's very scary.
It was in the realm of possibility, for sure.
The upside was I could literally walk away scot-free. And so I wanted to know what the prosecuting attorney was offering, and you said it would lower to the B felony, and I would potentially walk out with a 9-year sentence. Now, what I had to wrestle with was the simple fact that I just went through a spiritual awakening. I had seen what happens to me when I walk out early without my head screwed on straight, and I was culpable for the crimes that were committed, whether he had the right to pull me over or not. And I know I sound super naive, but this is what was going on in my head. I was culpable, and I felt like this was the universe saying, here's your shot, go do your time, correct the issue, get out and have a full life. So I chose to take the 9-year sentence. And I was very proud of myself. So were my parents. Something that most people don't understand is that with the 30-year sentence, I would have done every day. With the 9-year sentence, first time going to prison in the state of Missouri, I was looking at doing 3 years. And I'd already done 18 months getting sentenced. So now I had another 1.5 years, and I'm walking out with my son. I had probably an 8-year-old son at the time. He was 6 when I got arrested. So it all seemed like it was working out okay.
It seems like.
You didn't agree. Well, I mean, there's a big part of the story that's coming up.
Didn't agree because I never, ever, ever want to send a client to prison.
I know.
I feel like that destroys people. It makes them worse, and that we as a society should not be throwing people away, particularly over addiction, that they deserve treatment, and we could do so much better in the society. And I just was adamant that was the wrong place to send someone like you.
And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. First of all, it wasn't the wrong place to send me. It was horrible. The things that took place in there, the things that I lost. I'm sorry to keep saying this, but these are the things that are literally inside the book. And it was terrible. And when I think about this stuff happening to someone else, it makes me mad. because I'm a nonviolent drug offender. And I'm going to tell you what happened through the rest of the story really fast. Just another part of it all. So the reason I said seemingly seemed like a great thing that was happening to me is because I go off to do my time, and I'm having visits with my son and my mother, and I tell my son, hey, get a football. I'm nothing like what your mother's telling you I am. When I get out, I'm going to be your daddy. This is never going to happen again. And just, I don't know, you never know when you're going to get paroled out, but months before I get paroled out, the federal system comes in and indicts me literally for all the same evidence. It's not the same crime because this time it's conspiracy to manufacture or traffic, whichever one they chose, but it's the same crime twice, and I'm facing life. So I went through that twice, thinking that I'm never going to get out. That's the part that is insane to me, that not only do laws allow that to happen, but that there's people out there that understand what they're doing to human beings' lives and continue to do that.
And they don't care. That's sad.
It does. It makes me sad because in the process of all that, one of my sons got put up for adoption. I lost him for 14 years. We're now rekindling a relationship. I lost my stepfather, who was the man of my life. He died from cancer. I had to tell him goodbye over a phone. None of that would have happened had I not got re-indicted. But it was supposed to happen. It was purpose, and I learned a lot from it. But there's far more tragedy than just a 9-year sentence.
And what frustrates me as someone who tries to help the system be better is that the people who have that power and that discretion, like prosecutors, in that case, the federal prosecutors in Kansas City, they're not even taken into consideration. A, you've already done your time for the exact same crime. B, there's children, there's parents, there's other people they're destroying. And it's this vicious cycle of kids, of parents who are incarcerated become problem children themselves. And that's what we're seeing and paying attention to more today than we did 20 years ago when you were in jail. But it's just sad that they don't respect life more than they do.
They don't. And, I've thought about this for years and years and years. It sucks being on the receiving end, on the business end of the sentencing side of it all.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine how difficult it is to not become jaded, to not see the lowest form of life, walk in and out of the courtroom every single day, lie, try to game the system, do all these things. And I think it's really, really difficult for anybody to not start saying, hey, this is literally all about the law. I don't care whose life I'm ruining, because somehow I've separated all that from the human side of it all, and I've just made it about the crimes. But you're right. There's an opportunity inside the system for people to tally up points and create careers for themselves based on crimes. And it's a flaw in the system, because people are going to be people, right? I would love to sit around and drink a scotch with some of these guys that sentenced me and say, hey, this is what you thought wasn't ever worth walking out of prison again. And you're wrong, because I'm full of love. I'm full of compassion. I've got something to say and to contribute, and I'm going to change as much of the world as I humanly can. And if you guys think that should be locked up, you can go to hell. I mean, that's what I would love to have a conversation about.
Well, in a way, you're doing that just by being successful, and success is the sweetest revenge, I always say.
It's fine. Here's what bothers me the most, and you're aligned with this 100%. This is what I love about you. People can talk till they're blue in the face about how they got into law to help people, and how they're criminal lawyers because they want to make sure that people's rights are represented correctly and blah, blah, blah. I believe every word that comes out of your mouth, not just because of, I've had a few conversations with you over the last 4 weeks, but literally just the way you are and the way you were with me. It's just amazing. So I wanted to throw that out before we get too far away from that part of the story. But what kills me is, imagine if I was 18 years old and instead of 28, right? Yeah, I was a screwed up 28-year-old, but At 18, you're literally defining what status is and what's important and, you know, what respect is. And you go to prison. Now, imagine that you don't have a dad and you're raised by a single mother. Imagine that you have uncles that have been in and out of prison. Imagine you have no chance of getting out. And then you do a 10-year sentence, or you do an 8-year sentence, or whatever. You go through a process that I went through. Imagine how insanely impossible it is for that human being to walk out and be a good person or a contributing factor, or at the very least not be angry at the world and just hate. That's the part that crushes my heart. How did those people ever reform? How did they ever get out and have a life? How did they raise children in love and understand what it's like to trust and believe?
Most don't, Kyle. That's why I
That's,
hate prison so much. And
that's the part that kills me. And a lot of them are getting put away for some weed, right?
Yeah.
Which is going to be legal in the next 5 years everywhere.
I know.
You
I
know?
think it's the stupidest system in the world to incarcerate people, especially for nonviolent crimes. There are so many other alternatives that are better. So, well, we can't fix the world overnight, but one case at a time. I remember when I was your public defender, I was notorious in the Lafayette County Jail of telling my clients, rack them up. You don't have to plead guilty. I don't care if you're guilty. You don't have to plead guilty to anything. I will go to trial for you. And I won my first 12 trials. I fought for everybody I could, and including you, but obviously you made a different choice that you thought was going to minimize the damages and be a surefire answer until the feds come in and rock your world. So then you ultimately do get out. I don't know if there's any more parts of the story about incarceration and you trying to find your way, but you do get out after a total of what, 9 years?
I did a total of 7.
7.
I did, yeah. I ended up doing a total of 7, and the sentencing. So the one thing that I would point out, and this is a miracle. This is a flat miracle. So I'd spent 4 years of my life essentially thinking I'm going to do life in prison, right? There was a few months that I was in prison and thought I was going to get out, but that was 4 or 5 months, and then I got re-indicted. So 4 years, you can't imagine what it does to your self-worth. You can't imagine what you think the entire world thinks about you. You just cannot imagine. It doesn't matter how strong and confident and talented and all those things you are. You think that you are what people have told you you are, somebody that should be locked up and thrown away.
Yeah.
And I'm getting ready to get sentenced. This is my second lawyer, not as good as you, but my second lawyer. And she comes to me on the day of sentencing, and she says, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to get all that. You know, your gun wasn't your gun, and, you know, all these other things. And then she goes, oh, by the way, I filed for, and I don't know the terminology, and I don't remember, but I filed for essentially a furlough. And I said, a furlough? I said, what are the chances? She goes, look, don't get your hopes up. Please don't get your hopes up. And I had already done this with my father dying. I thought I was going to get to go to his funeral. And I had been essentially programmed to stay away from hope. Hope is for suckers when you're a convict, right? You just need to stay even keeled. What happens, happens. But I couldn't put this one down, right? And this was 5 minutes before I walk into the courtroom. And she says, the guy, I think he was 78 years old. He's been on the bench for a while. He's never granted one of these. And we go into court. I have a dozen friends that I haven't seen in 10 years who had just shown up. A really good friend of mine, Tim Merle, brings them all. He happens to be a state trooper. And he shows up in his uniform, and he gets up there and he talks for me. And he sentences me to 7 years. And everybody freaks out. There's a murmur in the crowd. And then he says, now, about this furlough. And he has me come up there with counsel. And he's sitting there looking at it. And he's like, I have no idea how you think this is going to serve the district. And he looks at it again and he says, I've never, ever granted one of these. And then he looks out in the crowd and he says, but I can see Mr. Houston has community support. I'm going to grant it. I'm getting chills right now and getting choked up.
Ew.
And he banged the gavel and said, be back. Woo. be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm going to release you. And I got 30 days in between the sentencing and going off and doing my last 3 years down in Miami. And it was the most important 30 days of my entire life, because I got to go back to Higginsville. I got to hang out with friends. I got to be with my kids. I got to be with my sister. I got to do all these things that reminded me that I can make it, that I can live through this, that I am somebody. And I went to do the back end of this 7 years with all this confidence and enthusiasm and excitement. It was just so critical to me that the universe threw me that bone. So I didn't want to gloss over that. That was important.
Yeah, that was very important, and that was a gift to give you back to humanity, even if it was just for a month, so that you could go and do your next stint with some compassion in your life, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. So to answer your question, I fast forward, we're doing a lot of fast forwarding. I walk out of prison in 2005. And this is after 7 years of incarceration. I was at FCI Miami at that time. FCI Miami was a medium security, but it had a lot of notorious guys like Noriega, Noriega. Yeah, he was in there. A lot of Pablo Escobar's guys. I mean, this is Miami, right? This is what's so great about Miami. This is the only prison that I went to, and I went to 8 of them, right? This is the only prison that I'd ever been to where they had a pseudo ceiling all across the yard. They had these cables that were crisscrossed and these things that looked like big fishing bobbers all over them, because people in the 80s and 90s were landing helicopters and getting these drug lords out of there. So they had to create this fake ceiling over the yards. I mean, this is real money. And I'm this small town guy just, trying to wrap my head around this thing. Anyway, I walk out at 35, no college degree. I've got an insane work history gap. I have no network. I have no plan. I have nothing but a bulletproof belief that I'm going to make my life work. I'm scared to death. I'm institutionalized. I'm constantly feeling like nobody understands me and I'm alone and I'd be better back in prison. I mean, I go through all of that stuff. And eventually, I go from a $10 an hour employee at a call center. I was the guy that called up and said, hey, if you sign a 2-year extension on your Verizon plan, we'll send you a free flip phone. I did that for a short amount of time. And a decade later of my life, I was a vice president inside a $2 billion publicly traded company. And I had this amazing, scary, white knuckling 10 years of my life where I just never took no for an answer. I hid my background from everybody and I kept my head on a swivel and I looked, recognized, and took advantage of every opportunity that was put in front of me. You couldn't outwork me. You couldn't out-practice me. You weren't going to outlearn me. You damn sure weren't going to outsell me. And I put 2 companies in 8 magazines, Fastest 500. I took 1 to acquisition. It wasn't a small amount of success. And I still have no idea, like it was a whirlwind, right? How I did it, but I did it. I made sure I did it.
It is a whirlwind, and it's why I said success is the sweetest revenge, because when you describe what you were doing out in the world, you were more successful than every prosecutor and every judge in the state of Missouri. I mean, seriously, you went from 0 to so fast in 10 years with no college degree, with this institutionalized history and being a convicted felon. You blew them all out of the water financially, successfully. You were in San Francisco, right?
I was.
So tell us, like, how does someone with no college degree accomplish all this, let alone the conviction that you hid because somehow you made it through some background checks that weren't happening, I guess?
That's right. I mean, in the beginning, you had to understand that when I was on parole, excuse me, before I gained trust with my parole officer, I was on parole and federal probation at the same time. So I had to tell my first employer that I was, that's the deal. And my parole officer would come visit me at work and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Eventually, they started to realize I wasn't the guy they needed to worry about anymore. And so to simply answer that loaded question, how do you do it? It was a series of micro decisions. I mentioned before that, you know, I have a very high belief. So there's a big difference between self-worth and self-confidence. I lack nothing in self-confidence, whether it's earned or not, whether it's true or not. I think I can do anything I set my mind to. My self-worth is the issue. That was how I got addicted, right? I had some abusive background in my childhood, you know, all of that sort of stuff, which I'm not blaming completely on the addiction, but it certainly plays into that stuff.
Right.
So I show up with this, I know I can do it. I'm Kyle Houston, chip on my shoulder, and this dichotomy between there's all these people that believed in me in my past that I have to show up for, and there's all these people that think I can't do it, that I have to rub this in their face, right? And these people don't even know that I'm thinking this way. But that dichotomy was extremely important to me, because anytime something bad happened, lots of bad things happen, lots of hard things happen. Here's a perfect example that you would never imagine. 2.5 years of being out, I earned my way. I created a position at a startup company, earned my way into being director of North American sales, and couldn't get into Canada because of my record.
Right.
And again, employer doesn't know any of this stuff. The people that work for me don't know any of this stuff. So every promotion, every good thing always had this shadow looming over me and would just give me fear and regret. And so that sort of thing drove me to be better. Like, one of these days, you know, the long arm of my past is always right behind me. One of these days, people are going to find out I need to show up with a resume. I need to have things and milestones that I could point at and say, you'd be a damn fool to get rid of me. Look what I've done. So it's a combination. It's a perfect storm for success. You got a chip on your shoulder. You got the people you owe it to. You got the people you got to show that you can do it. And then you've got this intense, incredible, never-ending fear of being found out that you've got to prepare yourself for all the time. And that created all that success.
And so you found yourself in San Francisco helping these companies grow, like you said. One went to acquisition, which means went public, right?
Didn't go public. No,
Oh.
we got acquired. We got acquired by the $2 billion publicly traded company that I was talking about earlier. So, and it was a great multiple. It was a fantastic experience that I got to be not just a part of, but a big reason why they did it. And they never would have, I never would have been able to walk through their door and gotten a job, filled out an application, showed up with my resume and gotten a job, because there would have been a background check and it wouldn't have happened. So I kid everybody. In order for me to get into companies like that, I had to take a company from 1 million to 20 million in 3 years and sell it to them to come in through the back door and make sure they knew who they were talking to, right? That was the only way I could get a job like that.
You made yourself so valuable, they couldn't, lose you.
I don't know how that sounds. If I shake my head, yes, but I mean, that was the strategy.
Right. So for people watching this who want to succeed, but really you're right on the money when you say your self-worth. You can have all the confidence in the world, and maybe there's people out there struggling with self-confidence too who are watching this. How do you work on your self-worth? How do you overcome that to be successful? Because you ended up not just being successful in business, but you were able to find love and have children. And all of this in a very expensive, busy, fast-paced city of San Francisco.
Yeah, and I still own property out there, thank goodness, right? I love that. So the question is, how do you work on self-worth? Self-worth is, in my experience, right? The vast majority of your issues with self-worth are going to be around love, and they're going to be around forgiveness. And there's something that you are either attaching fault and guilt to that probably doesn't belong, or there's an incredible amount of shame that you cling to that chips away at your self-worth. So where it starts, and look, I don't know which one, the chicken or the egg in this situation, right? Whether you start to forgive people for what they've done to you, and then you find a path to forgive yourself, or you forgive yourself and you find a path to start forgiving other people. It doesn't matter. Forgiveness needs to start, and you need to start to realize, man, I'm going to take an assumption that people don't cuss on this, so I'm going to do my best not to do that. But everybody screws up. Everybody screws up. And I think if you really dissect the most successful, we'll air quote that, successful people in the world, they all have a self-worth issue, and that's what drives them, right? But the way to get through that is not, hey, look at how many people are around me in this echo chamber of me that are telling me I'm great. You really have to dive in deep and figure out all the things that I just said, right? Everybody screws up. Everybody's got their own issue. Everybody's got their own cross to bear. And whatever you've done, whatever it is, and I don't care, people can throw anything at me. It is worth forgiving, and you are worth love. And the deeper you can dive on those things, the better your self-worth is going to get. I still have self-worth issues. I still do. I love to talk about the success far more than I love to talk about the drug addiction, right? That takes work. But the truth is that I do love myself in a healthy way. And a lot of it has to do with my kids and my wife, and the realization that I didn't know what I was doing. I was a dumb kid. I'm still a dumb kid in a lot of ways, right? And that's forgivable. It doesn't mean my heart's bad, right? And I'm not flawed forever. I'm a few key concepts or a few paradigms being shifted from being Gandhi, right? We just have to realize that. So that's what helps with self-worth. You're shaking,
found that all
me, or are you agreeing? I don't know.
No, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm shocked. Like, you found that all on your own, or just, going to church, or what? How did you even find the ability to reach the place of forgiveness and self-love that so many struggle with?
Lots of heartache, lots of tragedy, right? I mean, this is the unfortunate thing about the human condition. The only way any of us are going to get real wisdom is through pain and grief. And again, anybody can challenge me on that. You can gain knowledge all day long, but it's not going to sink in on a deeper level until there's some pain wrapped around that, right? And that sucks. That's the way it is.
Well, I think we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes.
We certainly do that. But if your failure hurts enough, like, let's say you want to be the best football player in the world, right? And you are second string. Okay, that's kind of a failure in your mind, but does that hurt enough? Let's say you want to be the best football player in the world and you lose both legs. Now you can't run. Now there's some real pain, and you're going to start to figure out what it's like to feel and be sad and understand other people that have been through different things. So again, it's the amount of wisdom is directly proportional to the amount of pain. And I'm not saying there's not smart, wise people out there that, haven't gone through prison, right? Haven't gone through losing their stepfather and all those things, but something happened in their past that caused them to reflect deeper than they would if they were just reading a book.
Right. That's true.
Now, church, I think this is important to say, church isn't my thing. To me, and I certainly was raised a Christian, but for me, the Bible Belt's brand of Christianity, at least the way I understood it, put such a low ceiling on my ability to have a relationship with God and my Creator that I had to completely release that. That doesn't mean that I don't love Jesus, right? And I don't get hung up on whether there was a resurrection or a virgin birth or any of that stuff. My thing is this, Jesus isn't the only path for everybody, and the institution of religion, I don't mean to pick on Christianity, but the institution of religion almost always will take people just so far, right? Because this is about discovering self. This is about your divinity within. This is about your connection with God and the universe, which will eventually expand into your connection with everybody here. And a lot of times, this elite, I'm going to heaven and you're not club puts this crazy, for me, it made it impossible to understand benevolence, unconditional love, and how God can be somebody that I respect if he can put people in hell for 5 minutes of a mistake or whatever it is. That feels a lot like prosecutors in prison to me, right? So I had to let that go. And now I'm going too deep. I'm sorry.
It's your journey and your path, and so no, it's not too deep. There are people out there that will appreciate your perspective. You ultimately, like we talked about, found your way to a better self-worth and success in life. You want to talk about family and how you were able to, because you got to have a lot of self-love to be a good dad and a good husband.
Oh my goodness. So I have a fractured relationship. So my son Dylan. So I have 4 children, and it's all so good. My life is so enriched. My life is so fulfilled, and like those words, I hesitate to use them because they don't even come close to what I want to say. Like I don't have the words. I'm sure there's something in Sanskrit or a character in Chinese that covers what I'm trying to say, but I don't know it. I have a fractured relationship with my son Dylan, who I love to death, but he went through the stuff. He was 6 years old when I got arrested. He was 13 when I got out. He came and lived with me and my wife. It, by the way, isn't his mother. He came to live with me and my wife, and he graduated high school and had he's popular and was almost the king candidate, or he was a king candidate anyway, he was popular. He had a good life. But we still have things that we're working through, right? Sean, who was adopted at 4 years old, who I didn't talk to again until he was 18, we're working on this weird concept for him that I love him to death, because to me, he was a character in my life. To him, I was a fantasy that he had met me, but at 4 years old. So now he's trying to wrap his mind around at 22 years old, this man who tells him, touches him, hugs him, loves him. I love you. I always have, right? So it's different.
How did you connect with him? And I'm interested in that story specifically because I'm adopted at birth.
Oh, I remember that.
And my birth mom found me when I was 22 years old. So the minute you said 22, I was triggered back to remember how I was at 22 and how hard it was.
That's so important to me. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I remember you telling me, and there was some reason why that touched me so deeply to know that. It does. And okay, so to answer your question, I was in touch with his adopted mother, right? And so she would allow me to email him, and it started to become obvious to me that she was threatened by my success, and that she was afraid, even when he was 15, 16 years old, that somehow I would still take him away. I don't know what was going on, and it was weird. But when he was 17 and a half, she reached out to me and said, I can't do anything with him. I want to know if you'll take him. And I have the greatest wife in the world. I will tell you, oh my gosh, the most supportive, loving, just amazing human being on the planet, the complete opposite of me. And she said, he's your son. Let's do this.
Oh, wow.
And the adopted mother, said, nah, she didn't say just kidding, but no, I don't think so. And then it became obvious that she's going to use the last 6 months before he can actually reach out to me and play this game where somehow she's being benevolent and I need her, and I'm not, like some sort of a crazy Stockholm syndrome she's trying to create with me. I don't know. But I finally said, look, I don't want to talk to you anymore. He's got 6 months and he'll be 18. If he wants to reach out to me, we're going to do that. The day he turned 18, he reached out to me on Facebook. And I missed the message. Oh my God, this breaks my heart. I didn't see the message for 2 weeks. And he must have thought for that 2 weeks that I didn't want to have anything to do with him. And as soon as I saw it, it was on Messenger. And I was like, oh my God, because I'm growing startup companies, right? I'm not on Facebook. And
You
I,
were a little busy.
I call him. I said, are you comfortable coming to California? I mean, within a week and a half, I'd flown him out, and, I'm giving him a tour of the city, and I've got my arm around him, and
You were so happy.
oh, you have no idea. You have no idea. Oh, such a big deal. But like every 22-year-old, even if you were with your parents your whole life, you get to text him and he answers back, and you get to sometimes talk to him when he's not too busy and not playing video games, right? Because he's a normal boy. So and he lives in Arizona. I just wish they could all live with me.
And where do you live now?
I live in Tampa. We just bought a house here in oh my gosh, Palm Harbor, Florida, in January. So, but I still own a house out in San Francisco. We just bought a house here. Love it. Now, my daughters. Oh my God. I have, every daddy's going to say this about his daughters, right? But I have the greatest 2 girls in the world, and I am a god to them. All they want to do is impress me. All they want to do is love me. All they want to do is, like, there's nothing I can do that's wrong. And it's such an uplifting, redeeming world that I live in right now. And it's a combination of, it's really, really good, and there's so much love in my house. Like, there isn't a day that they don't hear me say it 20 times how much I love them. But it's also this weird mixture of, I don't have to know, I don't have to lose what I have to know what I have, right? The saying, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Well, I'm there, right? Without even losing my children. I know what it's like to think I'm never going to get to kiss my kids again or get to raise them. Like, they are the manifestation of all of these dreams that I created, all of these images that I created when I was locked up. Like, what's it going to be like? Who am I going to marry? What is this woman going to be like? What's the relationship going to be like? What are my friends going to be like? And it was all around love. And it was all around, I want people to miss me if I'm not around. And my children are never going to get too far from me. And how am I going to act differently? So I'm that guy now in this world that I created in my mind 15 years ago. And it's perfect. It's perfect.
That's fantastic.
That's the success.
Yeah. The success is finding happiness with people around you, who don't judge you, it sounds like, because I don't think, while you kept your past a secret to be successful in the business world, you didn't do that with your wife.
Oh, no. No. I told her. Yeah. So that's a whole story in itself, which I'll say. But my wife is such a trite term, but she is my guardian angel. There is no doubt in my mind that life created her to nurse me back to health and take care of me. And she is, look, don't get me wrong, she's a feminist, she's strong, she doesn't need a man, she's none of those things. She's not some throwback from the 1950s, but she takes care of everybody. Oh my gosh, I couldn't have done anything without her. I couldn't. You're laughing at me.
Oh, no, I'm laughing for 2 reasons. One is my dog finally has said, I want attention. And we're talking about family and taking care of our family. And it's ironic because this is my family right now, this needy dog. But it's great to hear, I've had lots of clients through the years who don't come out so successful, and they don't ever find the self-forgiveness and the self-love, and they don't beat the addiction. It's so different for everybody. And it's so great to hear from someone who, like yourself, when you reached out to me 4 weeks ago, for me to hear that story, it was amazing. I sometimes get thank you cards from parents or former clients, and it means the world to me to hear of a client's success.
I was so happy to talk to you. It wasn't easy, by the way. I had to go I couldn't remember your name. I felt so terrible. And I don't know, did you remember mine when I said, hey, this is Kyle
I
Houston?
absolutely remembered your name. I
Oh,
did.
then
I don't
that's a
know why.
leave a mark.
Probably your last name is unusual to me, but I don't know why, but I did. I
But
think
it
I
meant a lot.
represented you for like 2 years, it seems like, or 18, solid
It
18.
was 18 months. It was
Yeah.
18 months. Yep.
And I remember having to visit you in the jail. And then you reminded me that when our case was over, I came to visit you in Kansas City. I don't remember that, but you did.
In Jackson County, you did. And it was, I talk about that 30-day furlough that I got, which was a miracle, and how it gave me the strength to keep going and hold on to who I really am, because that's the battle of prison, right? There's certainly loneliness, and there's certainly all of the things that cause you to think, but holding on to the person that your parents raised you to be, that's the complexity. And there was very specific things that happened. The furlough was one of them. Your visit, and just your clear and obvious belief that I didn't belong, that I was a good person, was very critical to me managing that stage of my life. So that's why I was so happy to talk to you 4 weeks ago. Because I mean, look, thanking you then, yeah, okay. But telling you, hey, I've never forgotten any of that, and your kindness created this, like played in some large or small role, we'll never know, in what I am now. I just wanted you to know that.
I so appreciate you reaching out.
And don't ever stop being the person you are.
Well, thank you. You
You're
neither.
welcome. I
You,
won't. Well,
and I want you to talk about the book, because the launch party is coming up, which I will be at on August 7th, and you
all
wrote
right.
a book,
Yeah.
Patchwork Junkie, which you have to, where does the name come from?
Oh
Junkie,
my gosh.
but Patchwork?
Yeah. So one thing that I'll tell you about, um, the reason the book happened is because 2.5 years ago, I was in a failed partnership, a business partnership. I pulled completely out of corporate America, and then I created this partnership, and it was on the fritz. And my wife and I had found ourselves in this life that was diminished, and we weren't happy. And every decision I was making was out of fear and insecurity that still stemmed, who knows how far back, but certainly had a lot to do with the prison and the drugs and, hiding everything. And I told my wife, I said, enough's enough. I'm gonna start telling our friends. Scared us to death. And then I decided I'm gonna write a book about it. And as I started to write the book, I started to forgive myself. I started to figure things out. I cried during a lot of this book, but I started to realize that if I'm going to help people, and if I'm going to release this thing that's got a stranglehold around my neck, I'm going to have to come clean on everything. So I wrote this raw, harrowing, just real honest book about my experience, what we just talked about, right?
So the book has the addiction, the use. I read a chapter of it, so I know that you talk about some stuff way back before you got arrested, what led to your incarceration.
That's right. The only book 2 is going to be about the success. Book 1 is about the drugs and the existential journey, and the prison, and trying to maintain it. There's so many ups and downs in there, but trying to maintain my father's son. But when it came time to name the book, I hadn't completely given into this idea of my identity being a drug addict. And so junkie, just something kept telling me junkie needs to be in the name, but my ego kept saying, are you kidding me? There's no way. Can you see Kyle Houston, author of something that says junkie, on LinkedIn? All of the Silicon Valley VCs seeing that, and could I ever work again? And then I finally said, well, what goes good with junkie? And I started to think about how incongruent my life is, my entire story. And so Patchwork came to mind, and Patchwork Junkie went together really well. And so I asked every friend I knew, and this is after coming up with 500 different options for the names. Yeah, this is months of going through exercises. Anyway, I asked 2 friends. One of them told me he would never But he said, look, it's a great name, but I would never let junkie identify me. My ego's too weak. Something in my mind said that's exactly why you have to do it. And I did it. So this represents my commitment to helping the people that need to be helped with this story, and my commitment to never being scared of my past again. And it has a lot to do with helping with my self-worth as well. So I'm excited to get it out there.
I bet it was very cathartic to.
Oh, you have no idea.
Story.
The relationship with my stepfather alone is like I never saw that coming. But writing this book, and, he's dead, he's gone, and I just feel like he approves of it. And yeah, I mean, I just learned a lot about him and me and forgiveness through writing this book.
You know what's special about you, Kyle, is how authentic you are and vulnerable by telling your story and being willing to tell it. But for a long time, you did not want to be vulnerable. Years and years, you kept it from everybody.
Not this vulnerable. I'm scared to death.
Yeah.
Scared to death. I hope I don't come across scared now.
No, you don't. You come across very sure of yourself. And you're doing the right thing, because and we can talk about that too. In addition to you writing the book, I mean, you left corporate America because you have decided that my new mission in life, instead of being successful and showing everyone that I am, not a junkie, is that I'm going to help people. I'm going to use my story to help people and bring hope into this world. And there's a lot of people struggling with hope right now, not to mention, that we're in a pandemic. A lot of people are lonely. Suicide rates are up. Domestic violence is up because people are not exactly excited about being stuck at home all the time with each other. And so it's hard times out there. And addiction is a part of what's happening with people who are depressed. People self-medicate.
It's the one thing we didn't touch on, and we won't talk about it much, but I've also been through stage 4 cancer during the climb in corporate America, which is a crazy story. So in my mind, and there's, a dozen or so more things that I've gone through as well. But in my mind, people don't go through that stuff and come out on the other end and not have a purpose to use it, right? It's no longer my story. It's no longer my experience to hold inside anymore. It's now my story and my experience to help people. And that's my responsibility, right? And there's a lot of ways you can dice this up and look at it, but that's the conclusion I came to, which feels really good for me, right? I'm not suggesting everybody that's been to prison or everybody that's got some dark secret run out and tell everybody, but I promise I'm encouraging it. But what I am saying is that for me, the only thing that makes sense out of any of it is that I'm here to help people that are suffering. And what's even more important, which was an epiphany for me, is that the success and the status and the money and all of that stuff was just another extension of my insecurity, all of it. And look, I get that everybody else got this memo with me many, many years ago, but when you're doing it, when you're succeeding, you don't recognize that this is literally an extension of prison, right? You don't think about those things until you step back and you can look from the outside in, but it really is. It really is. I'm sorry I did the drugs, so let's see how much stuff I can buy to mask all that. Or, I missed out on my 30s and my late 20s, so let's hurry up and build this career so that I can catch up. All of that's an extension of my screw up back then. What's not is this phase of my life. This phase of my life where I want to help people, where I literally rolled the dice and sacrificed my family's future to do so, is an extension of nothing but what I'm supposed to be, right? It's not insecurity, it's not shame, it's not guilt. It is what makes sense of the person that's talking right now. And I love that. I love that. And it takes away the fear of it all, because it's scary. It's scary to do this.
It is scary. Because you left what you know, where
That's
you
right.
knew you could feed your family, to really a 180. You're now in the service community, or the service industry, so to speak. The social worker, the criminal defense lawyer, the mental health worker, psychologist, those people who help people. So
I mean, the word service is so important to me. The word serve and service, both of those things, for a guy that's, I'm sure a lot of people would have mistaken as being selfish most of his life. Now all of a sudden, humility and service resonates so deeply inside me. So it's important.
well, and I think that when you talk about being selfish, I think we are very selfish when we're young. I think that, the world revolves around us when we're teenagers and that in our 20s. And I also think that addicts in particular, in the addicts in my life and in my career, they're very selfish when they're in the midst of their addiction. And so
It's
you
about
now
survival. It's about a skewed definition of survival for sure.
right. And they
Yeah.
take no prisoners, and lots of victims in their wake. That's why I love the 12-step program, because it forces you to not just forgive yourself, but to reach out to the people you've also hurt.
It does. It does. It's amazing. Hey, one thing I want to make sure that I do mention is where I'm going to be on the 6th. So we're putting together this launch. As I just told everybody that I live in Palm Harbor, Florida. We've got 2 weeks to put this launch party together. It's going to be at Parlor in the Crossroads District. Doggone it, I've got, here we go. It's at 1707 Locust, and it's at 5 p.m. on August 6th. And that is the launch of the party. It only makes sense to me to do this in Kansas City to kick off, whatever it becomes. But I mean, this is where it all started for me. This is important. And then I have another book signing on the 8th at Arcadia Moon in Higginsville. So there'll be some kind of a homecoming there. But I'm anxious to get as many people to come and talk to me and meet me and let me meet them and see if there's anything that we can do to enhance one another's lives. It would really mean a lot to me.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I'm going to be at your launch party on August 6th for sure. But I also want you to be able to talk about, you said there's going to be a book number 2.
There's going to be a book number 2.
So in addition to book number 1, so you're going to finish the story, so to speak, with book number 2. So you'll be back, it sounds like. Hopefully.
I'll be back. I will be back. Yeah, I'll be back as long as time permits and I'm not too famous.
Do you have any plans for what you're, other than writing the book to help people? What else are you trying to do? Are you trying to get into the speakers circuit, so to speak?
Yeah. So I have a business. It's a coaching, speaking business. I've got clients, and we work really hard on self-worth and all of those things, right? But the speaking, we kicked everything off in January. And as you know, there's this thing called coronavirus, which kind of changed the world. So we're navigating through this new, economic climate, digital world, and we're figuring out how we're going to create this business this way. So it's going a little bit slower than in planned, but no, we're still anxious to get the message out, and it's really important. And part of the kickoff is this book launch. So nothing but blue skies from here on out.
That's great. So coaching people who's your audience? Who's the avatar, as we call it in the business world, of who your clients are?
Well, so I hope this doesn't sound like the perfect avatar is a young, hungry sales guy, right? Because if there's one thing I'm really good, but it doesn't fall in line with hope and self-worth and all that other stuff. I realize that, but you asked me what the avatar looks like. When it comes to sales, I have a no BS approach that works. I mean, I grew a company from 1.5 million to 14.1 almost single-handedly, and I really, really understand how to manage customers and deliver on goods and things like that, which is something missing. But I have a couple clients that I'm also working with about, they want to create coaching businesses, and what they need is an understanding of what it takes, what drives them, right? So right now we're in the process of pulling out what drives them. So the perfect client for me are the people that know they've got a message, that are afraid to be seen, and they need a little kick in the rear end to get that thing going, right?
Yeah.
Businesses that are flatlined or have a sales organization, or very specific, young, hungry sales guys.
That's fantastic. I can see you as a very good salesperson, and then now you're coaching those, and coaching entrepreneurs really is what I would see you coaching as well, not just salespeople who have a job for another corporation, but those who want to run their own business too.
Absolutely. I laugh because I don't want it to dilute the meaningful conversation we just had, because I know that some people, when they hear sales guys, they think used cars or something like that.
I don't have any, no, I don't have any judgment. I think we're all selling all the time. Every human being on this planet has to sell something every day, whether it's themselves or their work or, you know, their personality, whatever. Everyone's selling all the time.
What's important to me is that people believe in themselves and they understand that they deserve to be seen. But let me ask you, let me switch something around. What if you would have, you said everybody, you have no judgment. What if you would have asked the question, who's my perfect coaching avatar? And I would have said, I'm coaching prosecuting attorneys. Would you have judged that a little bit?
I would have judged you.
I want to challenge that a little bit.
I might have just said, I don't believe you.
You don't believe me. I think everybody's worth saving. So, well, now that we feel like we're better than them, I'm so happy.
It's very true though, that everyone is worth saving. And that's why I love what I do, is because I have the ability to intervene, hopefully at a moment in time when I can make some headway. And I didn't go to law school to become this kind of lawyer. I went to law school to, you know, make money and be a corporate lawyer. And then in law school discovered, no, I had a professor who said, you got to be in the courtroom, not in an office at a desk, because I took a trial advocacy class. And now that's my passion, is teaching other lawyers how to try cases. And I've been doing that for 20 years now.
Wow.
In addition
Totally
to representing clients.
I would love to know how many people you had represented before you represented me. I mean, it's an impossible ask right now, but not that you seem young and green, but you certainly were very enthusiastic. Like, you were anxious to do, like, this is a big case, let's take it to trial. And it was awesome. It really was.
It was a big case because, you know, your life, you were facing life in prison, and I had found a way to potentially beat the case, and I was excited. I remember being excited about that. But, you know, I had started at the public defender's office in Kansas City, and I didn't have a jury trial my first 12 months, and that's all I wanted was a jury trial. And then I had 12 back to back to back after. And that happened when I went to Lafayette County to be the public defender for that county, is when all of a sudden all my trials came. In Kansas City, I didn't have that opportunity. So,
wow. Everybody felt like they got gypped down in Lafayette County, huh?
I had a lot of trials, let's put it that way. And thankfully a lot of wins.
Well, that's great.
A lot of people who deserved second chances, and a lot of people that were actually innocent, you know. That's the hardest thing about what I do.
I wonder what my life would have been like if I would have listened to you. I'd probably be a used car salesman. Who knows?
I think things happen for a reason.
They do.
You came out the other side, which is just beautiful. It's just heartwarming to see success. And
that's good to hear.
And
it's great to hear. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard it, and it never gets old. And I cannot wait to start hearing how the book changes people and what means something to other people. Because I know some people are going to be like, are you kidding me? You put this in your book? So I really invite anybody that reads my book, anybody that listens to this broadcast, anybody that has heard about me, I invite them to reach out to me and just have a conversation, because I mean, it's what my life is right now, you know?
The good news is you're very available. We have the launch party August 6th. We have the book
Yes.
signing August 8th. And we will share that when we share this video as well.
Oh, good.
All that information on Facebook and YouTube. But you also have your website, KyleDeanHouston.com, right?
That's right. That's right. I'm having a hard time plugging myself. We had this beautiful organic conversation, and I'm forgetting that I do have some things to say. So yes, KyleDeanHouston.com, and then social media for Facebook and Instagram, which I'm active on both of those, at Kyle Dean Houston for both of them. I do a little bit on Twitter, but it's Twitter's whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Instagram, I post a lot of meaningful things. Some of them are humorous, but most of them just mean a lot about the wisdom that we talked about earlier, and just encouraging people to get up off their butts and make a great life for themselves. And then it's never too late, right? That's what my life stands for. It's never too late. I mean, I'm completely starting over again at the age of 50, right? And there's nothing inside me that doesn't think it's going to work out. It's just never too late. People just need to realize that life is meant for so much more than a dead-end 9 to 5 or guilt and shame or whatever it is that they're doing that's not fulfilling. It can be meaningful and important, and that's what I stand for. So anyway, check me out on Instagram. You'll see if I'm telling the truth.
That's a powerful final statement, but I have to ask you before we say goodnight.
Okay.
And I'm going to friend you on Facebook for sure. I'm barely ever on Instagram, but I'll find you on Facebook. But do you have any final statements of how you'd like to end this broadcast?
Any final statements? Well, I've said quite a bit. Look, I mean, the thing that is the most important to me, and it's going to echo what I literally just said, is that anybody that hears this needs to understand, whether you're in the throes of addiction or whether you're on the back end of addiction and you're looking at the rest of your life, or you're successful and not happy. No matter what it is, you don't have to settle. That this is where it gets woo-woo. There is a force in the universe that wants you to live a fulfilled life. You were created to be happy. And if what's going on in your life right now isn't doing that for you, stop it and do something else. And if you're in the throes of addiction and it looks bleak and there's no way out of it, just have faith in my words that it gets better. It gets better, and it can all change, and it will be absolutely better than it ever could have been without the addiction. So those are the final statements that I'd like to leave anybody with. And hopefully they can look at my life and say, look, if this schmuck can do it, we can too. Because I want to be that guy, right? So yeah, hopefully that resonates with somebody.
I think it will. I think there's plenty of people out there, family of those who are addicts and those in addiction, who need some hope and inspiration. So
awesome.
Kyle, thank you.
Hey, I cannot thank you enough. Oh, I'm sorry. What?
I was just saying thank you so much for doing this.
We thanked each other over each other. Yeah, I can't thank you enough. It is such a pleasure. I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks, in a couple of days. Yeah. And give you a hug if you do that with COVID.
I still do that with COVID.
I do too. So looking forward to it. I love your platform. Thank you so much. And maybe with book 2, we can do it again. Who knows?
Absolutely. Anytime.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to say goodnight to everybody, and hopefully you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you also follow Kyle Dean Houston on Facebook and on Instagram, and check out the book Patchwork Junkie. Patchwork Junkie.
That's right.